Hi, welcome, Digital Roundtable, March 16th. It is flying fast, 2022. We have a glorious day in paradise, 75 degrees San Diego weather in Austin. And to get us rolling, Dr. John Sibley Butler and the guitar.
Sometimes I think that love is somewhere, living on an island all alone. I can see it in the darkness, I can feel it in the distance, and then it's gone. And then I know that it is time for me to go and find my favorite girl. And when I look into her eyes, I see all the love there is in all the world.
All right, excellent.
Bravo.
So, John Butler, how are you, sir? We take it that you are in spring break up in North Austin, as I am in South Austin. What's going on at the University of Texas, and what's your take on the current events?
I am doing great on spring break, trying to relax a little bit. I think that the University of Texas is on spring break, and I think we're getting past the pandemic. I think the war is absolutely very, very interesting to watch on television, to see a modern city destroyed. It was very, very interesting to me. I think the way NATO has reacted is very, very interesting, and the way America is reacting is very, very interesting. So I think that, you know, we're now in a war of pandemic. It's a different kind of war. This is a physical war down on a country in Europe. And I think that as we search for different kinds of questions, the economy always comes to the very, very forefront. I feel like my car the other day was $100. And I think that there's lots of discussions on the world economy, and it's interesting to see how the humanity interacts with the economic kind of structure. So the question is, how long will Putin last, or how far will it go in Europe? And another question is, will we have a whole nother kind of type of order after this is all over? So when you combine everything that we've been through with the last 3 years, and then put a conflict with the NATO ally there, then it gets to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Llewelyn King, how are you, sir?
I am well. I'm here in Rhode Island, also known to you chaps as East Texas, where we are enjoying, I might tell you, Zimbabwe weather, which is beautiful and clear and livable. The weather I grew up with, as John is so jealous of. But there you are. It is an appalling time because we're seeing a very brave nation crushed ruthlessly. And we are, in many senses, because of our strength, impotent. It's one of the consequences of the atomic age, where you do not go to the help of a hurting country. It sets up lots of questions. If Russia triumphs in Ukraine and is able to establish some sort of puppet state there, which seems increasingly unlikely that it will function as puppet states normally do, but it opens up the issue of Russian ambitions, particularly for the Baltic states, and very especially for Latvia, which seems to be, they are members of NATO, which means, do we risk nuclear confrontation with Russia if Putin is still in power and if he moves crazily but relentlessly into the Baltic states? It also is a redefinition of our time, of our relationship with China. The more China shows friendship to Russia, the harder it is to pretend that China and the US are friendly trade partners. It's going to be a very difficult period. Everything that is happening is driving inflation. High cost of energy in Europe is prohibitively expensive. It is unclear. There are probably enough gas reserves for Italy, for Europe to get through this winter. But whether they can possibly, and their only real means of storing gas is to overpressurize the system. If they overpressurize the system, there are consequences there, but you also have to have the raw gas with which to overpressurize the system. Pressurizing the system is a means of storage. Britain, in particular, has been woefully negligent in building sufficient storage, believing somehow that they could go seamlessly and smoothly from gas dependence to make electricity to the perpetual wind blowing in the North Sea, except last year it didn't blow. And so the world is in a very precarious situation. Parts of it will blossom, but much of it will starve. Following the invasion into Ukraine, there will probably be a global food shortage. We will survive it because we're rich and we're large producers of food, but much of the world will feel very deprived, and there most likely will be starvation in the poor parts of the world. It is a very difficult time.
Yeah. Good insights, Llewelyn. Dave Elve, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I guess I could say I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller, as we used to say, right? But I really appreciate. Listen, Andre's good to see you. Llewelyn and Dr. Butler, good to meet you guys. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Excellent.
This is
Well,
let me the preeminent show on energy.
Well,
So.
we hope your disappointment isn't too severe.
I won't show any.
I shall try to keep my colleagues on track to save you from their meandering ideas.
Let me introduce you formally, Dave, for those of listening and watching that are not familiar with you. David is the Executive Vice President of PayGo, and he's going to be with us for the hour. And PayGo is, a company that has an electric platform for smart meter data collection and analysis solutions, and interfaces directly with the utility smart meter infrastructure to collect and consolidate data and for analysis. And I'll let Dave tell us more about it. I think the company has been around for a long time, and they have a very successful business. And one of the many levers of the energy transformation that we're witnessing. Prior to PayGo, David was investor and energy advisor at Prius, investor and advisory board member at Verdeco, vice president at Census, investor, VP, and principal consultant at Inspirius Solutions. He was a VP at Cellnet. I remember Cellnet.
You remember that? Yeah, I was going to say.
Oh, yeah. Group VP at Atos, director of global partners and alliances at the Convergent Group, and a business development manager at Schlumberger, which eventually acquired Cellnet.
It did. Somebody. I guess you can say I can't hold a job very well, can
I? Well, you're very good.
Well, welcome, David. We're glad to have you. As you know, we track digital transformations in this program, and we look at telecommunications, and we look at smart buildings and Industry 4.0, and we look at smart cities and smart energy. And to me, it's just amazing the acceleration of what's happening, despite of the even ups and downs, the peaks and the valleys of everyday life. KKR just got done announcing that they raised $17 billion for broadband and other infrastructure investments for private sector, right? And this is beyond the federal money. AT&T's making a big push to sell 5G networks to anybody who wants them. I don't know what that means. I can buy my own 5G network at my house or something like that. There is so many things going on. There's a new company that announced a new self-healing concrete substitute, which actually takes carbon from the air. It's all kinds of amazing things going on. There's a prediction that was made at South by Southwest yesterday that vertical takeoff and landing vehicles will emerge in mass volume by middle of the decade. That's all, like five years from now. It's kind of scary. But but maybe it will happen. We'll find out. And then the energy sector, the transformation is just amazing. So I'm curious, David, from your point of view and your company,
Mm-hmm.
can you share some thoughts or insights or lessons learned on COVID, the impact of COVID on the business, on your company, and then perhaps give us a glimpse of what does 2022 look like to you all?
Yeah, thanks. Again, I just want to say again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Again, a big fan of the show. Again, I think you guys are probably the preeminent energy podcast out there. So again, just a pleasure to be here. So really what again, just to pick up your question, Andres, what I really want to focus on really energy affordability. And we talk a lot about technology. I know you guys talk a lot about technology on the show. You know, whether it's DERMS or battery storage, charging, net metering, you know, renewables and integration, type of thing. It's, you know, obviously those are really important subjects right now in the world, but I think this is actually the timing on this week is actually really good because I really want to focus on the customer and about energy affordability, right? Because I'm going to give you a couple of stats here. I think that you'll find. Again, I hope you don't mind me taking a little bit of a diversion here because I really want to focus on the customer a little bit. You know, there's a CNBC story. It said 20% of customers couldn't pay their energy bills last year. Okay, in New York, in the state of New York, 1.3 million customers are more than 60 days behind on their bills. It's $1.7 billion total for the utility companies. But again, look at the customers. I talked to a commissioner the other day, a state commissioner, one of the southern states. They're anticipating a rate increase 3 times this in the next 12 months. So you know, 3 rate increases in the next 12 months. Interesting, just you're going back to your COVID point, right? And New Jersey is supposed to end disconnection moratoriums this week. Okay, the state is making the utilities provide a 1-year interest-free loans to customers that can't pay their bills. Again, I think that's great, but on the other hand, again, you got a lot of customers that aren't paying their bill. And two last points. One is a Midwestern gas IOU, their average customer, their average arrearage per customer, those that are in arrearage is $1,000. These are customers over COVID that can't pay their bills. And I'm sure you guys have probably seen the study that was done about a year ago that 40% of American households can't handle an unexpected $400 bill. And people get $400 energy bills these days, right? So those are kind of where I was kind of a little talk about today, because again, I think there's a lot to do here.
So what are your thoughts on why the utilities let that happen? You know, and you know, I can chime in and tell you that, you know, at Austin Energy, the bad pay, low income sort of challenge was about 3% of the whole business. And you know, and you would argue that Austin Energy, when I was there from 2003 to 2010, you know, municipality owned utility with a big heart, wouldn't disconnect anybody, always doing the right thing. But it's still, you know, even though our prices were dirt cheap, I mean, you know, at Austin Energy, the price structure is stepping based on volume consumption. So if you spend less than 500 kilowatt hours, consume less than 500 kilowatt hours, you pay 3 cents per kilowatt, and then it goes to 6 cents for the next 500, and so on and so on and so on. But most people that don't have a big house pay 3 cents, and a lot of these people could not afford the bill. So what do you think? What do we do? What's the answer?
Well, I think that's actually a really pretty interesting solution there for low income, is to have a tiered rate structure, right? I think that's probably a good start. And I think that's one of the most ambitious ones I've seen in some time. I think one of the things you can do is, and I want to talk a little bit kind of what we do very shortly, because this is kind of what we do is we provide with some of these newer CIS platforms. Again, I know you're very familiar with this, Andres, you know, is if you can give customers more timely information. So like we're doing hourly bill calcs now for water, gas, and electric. So when customers go online, they can actually see when they took that shower last hour, what that shower cost them in water. They can see when you heat that big hot tub in your backyard, Andres, you can see how much gas you used. But if we can provide that type of information, and this is really one of the lessons learned that we've done at PayGo, is our average customer on our program uses anywhere from 3.2% all the way up to 12% less, because they have a better understanding. They get notified, whether it's by mobile app or text or whatever, what they used in the last day or even in the last hour. What that translates into is customers, an 80 to 90% customer sat score, because they're used to this from their smartphone. They're actually getting that type of information. And here, lastly, as it ties into COVID, is 80% of customers that come on these types of programs pay off their arrearages, okay, versus 80%, and I know you remember this, 80% of customers you call in on a payment arrangement, 80% of the time they fail the payment arrangement, right? So I think part of it is, I like that rate structure. It's a very interesting idea. I think that's way ahead of its time. But again, I think giving customers timely information is also very, very useful for them, and it changes behavior.
Yeah, guys.
Yeah, well, Dave, this is very interesting. Let's put it in the context of affordable housing. Let's put it in the context of student loans. Let's put it in the context of the University of Chicago's human capital theory, about the relationship between education and how much money we make. There's a great book called Predict and Survive. And what you're suggesting is this: the more we can predict an outcome, perhaps the better we can manage it. What I find very interesting about the affordability stuff in your area is that we usually think that technology tends to bring the price of things down. We think that we get more, and Llewelyn hates this word, more efficient, although he does live in the modern world. As we become more efficient, then we should be able to be more predictive. And so therefore, the price of a calculator. I mean, when I was at Northwestern, my first calculator was $520,
Mm-hmm.
Now you get the same calculator, in a cornflakes box. So my question is, when you look at the data that we have and we talk about predict and survive, how do you think that your model of prediction and getting the movement of ideas to the consumer will actually solve this problem? Because we live in a world where we're saying is that, look, but how does it relate to the kinds of technologies that maybe can reduce the entire cost of what we're doing? I don't know if we want to get to the point where we have a energy divide in America, because everybody needs the energy. So how do you look at your data and giving people information so that they can predict and survive?
Well, again, I think, first of all, I would say efficiency. I think the energy industry is done an effective job of managing assets and providing services to its customers. I don't know that I would use, and maybe Llewelyn like this, I'm not sure I would use the word efficient to describe our energy infrastructure. But that being said, again, I think it's interesting because energy prices haven't done what you've talked about. There's the calculator of 20 years ago when you were in college, right, versus the calculator of today. But kilowatt hours don't go that way, right? We
Right.
continue. They're not going to get cheaper. Water's not getting cheaper. Gas is definitely not getting cheaper. So we see a continuous uptick in asset base, right? It's because we're putting more and more assets in the ground. Because first of all, our customers still expect that the lights stay on, right? Reliability, water, gas, electric reliability. And for that, I will tell you, when the four of us were kids, when the power went out at our houses, okay, now think about this. When we were kids, what did we do? We went outside and played baseball and football and tag and all that kind of stuff. I can tell you today what my kids do when there's a power outage. They go jump in my car and plug in their iPads to make sure that there's power in their iPads. So I would argue that reliability is even a bigger deal today than it was back then. All right, you lose power for an hour, it wasn't that big a deal. You lose power for an hour today, it's a big deal, right? Because you can't do anything. So again, I think that, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm saying I do think that providing information for customers. I'll give you a great story here real quick. Anecdotally, is my sister-in-law did lose power, okay, at her home, and she got a text message from Georgia Power, on her mobile app. She logged into Georgia Power, and it said the mean time to restore was going to be 2 hours, okay. She went up to Starbucks, got on social media, and said, hey, neighbors, we're going up to Starbucks. The Starbucks in my neighborhood used to serve wine after 4 o'clock. So they all went up, and they got all their neighbors on social media, all the way up to the Starbucks. They sat there, the 20 of them sat there for 2 hours. They got a message on their mobile app and said, hey, your power's back on. My sister-in-law, who knows I'm in the space, said, Dave, that was the most fun we ever had during an outage. Okay. And again, I mean, that's just an example of an outage example. But again, I think the trick is trying to see, going back to what Andres was saying, is, how do we keep people engaged in the space? Is our time of use pricing, is that our customers going to log, are they going to grasp on the time of use pricing? Think about this again. Let me harken us again back 20 or 30 years ago, because John, you were talking about going to LSU. My brother was at LSU when I was living in Michigan. We were only allowed to call him after 5 o'clock during the week or on the weekends, because we had time of use pricing, right?
Yep.
For long distance.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. Kids today that grow up in this market have no clue what we're talking about. They have no idea that you wouldn't pick up your phone until after 5 o'clock on Friday to call somebody long distance, right? So I think we've come a long way, which, in terms of what we've done. Again, and there's more ways to go. I think the technology is really gotten quite fabulous in the fact that we can do alert people when they've used more energy than they want. I'll tell you, let me get one last point on this, and Anders, I know you'll jump all over this, right? I think going forward, what's going to be really cool is that when we can actually talk to the thermostat, we can go bidirectionally to the thermostat, and the thermostat can go out in the marketplace, either to my IOU or to my retailer, and pick out the best rate available for me based on my usage pattern, where it can go out there and look at that. But my concern a little bit is, and maybe this is your concern too, John, is our low-income customers are going to be dragged behind, they can be behind the curve on this technology. I think those on the four of us, and those are maybe listening to this podcast, might be on board with that. But how are low-income customers going to grasp onto that? Long answer to your question.
I'm very interested in pay-as-you-go, and I'm very interested in time of use pricing. Mm-hmm. But so far, we've not seen it work dramatically well at the domestic level. People have lost control of the concept of controlling their electric consumption has somewhat dwindled over the decades. Here in New England, I'm sure in much of the country, we get an advisory from our utility of how we compared with our neighbors in usage, and that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. It certainly brought us somewhat to some awareness of what we use, and maybe causes us to turn a light off now and again, etc. But you need a very clear signal. If it were widely and absolutely known, and it were an established fact with a substantial price differentiation, a big gradient between, say, 9 o'clock at night and 6 a.m., people would move things, they would do their washing, they would run, an awful lot of people. But it has to be a noticeable amount, and it has to be known. It can't be complicated. All my experience of dealing with the public as a publisher and broadcaster is, if you make it complicated, you lose customers. Mm-hmm. Customers don't work. We found when we were publishing newsletters that if we asked people to call in to get delivery, electronic delivery or fax delivery originally, they didn't do it. If we sent it to them, they read them and were happy. So you really can't ask too much of your customer. If we go back a bit, and I don't know how PayGo works, but there used to be a time when, of course, you paid for electricity and gas at the point of use at the time. In England, it was the famous meters where you put a shilling in if you had one, or you borrowed one, or you wondered if this piece of metal would cheat the thing. The one I loved was the science students who learned they could freeze some substance so that it was
Stick it in
hard
the-
enough that they could put it in and it would melt away afterwards. They'd catch it and there would be no evidence that they had cheated. The one that worked with the most dramatic effect, in my view, was in South Africa, where before the fall of apartheid, I've not been able to catch up on this lately. I have tried in a somewhat desultory way, I confess. But they looked at the shacks, the terrible shacks in the poor areas made of tar paper, road signs, and anything you could do to create shelter. And they said there is no way that we're going to put electricity here at 240 volts. We'll be electrocuting people on a grand scale. But some genius said, instead of that, we'll put a pole, a utility pole inside the shack, and we'll have a takeoff board on it, many plugs, and we will have to pay for it. You will pay in advance with something very like a subway card or a bank card. But in order not to create a new currency and have crime associated with it, each card will be dedicated to the meter, your meter, one meter. It was dramatically effective. It improved the quality of life in the townships, as they were called, and it vastly improved the cash flow at ESCOM. And they got away from electricity stealing, which is rampant in the third world, and even some countries that don't think they're third world. I was in Georgia once, and I came in off the airfield about 3 a.m. or something, and I saw lights blazing in little stalls. And I thought, well, at least there's some prosperity here. Next morning, I looked at the polls and I saw how the prosperity worked. They were illegally connected, and the government didn't do anything about it. Same in Latin America, where up to 1/3 of the electricity is stolen. We don't have that problem. Now, our closest to stealing it is unpaid bills, which has been vastly exacerbated by the pandemic and by the government's action in cutting off cutoffs. It seems to me that we need to look at the whole matter of payment. If we had something where people pay as you go system, they would be very sensitive. If you knew that it was going to cost you $1 now, a cash dollar, to do the laundry at night, but it would cost you $2 to do it by day, you'd do it at night. But the whole issue needs to be looked at. And we need sociologists like John, John, I beg your pardon, to look at the issue of the motivations in society to basically save people from huge electric bills that they can't pay. Similarly, quite separately, we should probably save them from 27% interest on credit cards, but that's a different problem or a related problem.
So I'll give you an anecdote. So before I left Austin Energy, I think we did a survey in 2008. And we had built the first smart grid in the US, and we were primed to go into time of use pricing with our new billing system and all these things. And we had a survey that turned into a series of workshops with all kinds of stakeholders. And obviously, industrials are very well organized, and low income and nonprofits are usually well organized, and it's usually residential, and small commercials are not very well represented. Anyway, long story short, we thought the time of use was going to be a welcome thing, and the industrial sector has always used it. And to be honest with you, the nonprofits and the low-income guys rejected it. They thought that it would be a way to discriminate against low-income folks and nonprofits that wouldn't have the ability to buy the latest technologies and take advantage of what it would require to be in a time of use pricing scenario, and that they would be holding the bag and paying the highest pricings than anybody else.
Interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
no, that's a very real problem, and it's a true one. If there's about a service, something that hints at paternalism, that you need help because you're not good enough to do this, or you're not going to rise above the station that you have in life, people are going to reject it. So it's got to be much more universal. But tell me, Dave, about pay-as-you-go, your
Yeah.
system, PayGo. How does
Yeah.
PayGo work? How would a utility benefit if it put it in?
Yeah, so listen, the way it works today, and again, this is very remarkably similar to what you just described, right? So just from a cash we use the term meter to cash. We've used it forever, right? And what's great about today is we can do meter to cash in seconds, literally in seconds. So I can take a barcode, okay? I can put it on my phone or on my bill. I can go to all 75,000 locations around the country, literally. I can scan that barcode and give $20 to that clerk, and the $20 hits my account in real time. If I'm disconnected, it'll reconnect it in 30 seconds, which has happened to me. I actually got disconnected, okay? And I got a phone call from my wife saying, you dumb whatever you are, we got disconnected.
All right, it's all right, Dave. It happened to me.
I didn't have my glasses on, right? So I misread the text message I got. It said I had negative $6 on my account. I had, I thought I said $6. But anyway, so I went by, I paid cash with a barcode instead of, using, and that barcode is associated with that meter for as long as I live in that premise or in that flat or whatever. I scan the barcode, I make a cash payment, I'm good. Or I can make a credit card payment on my mobile app or whatever. And with smart metering today, the meter literally can reconnect in seconds. And so it's very, very similar to what we see in smartphones, because 30% of all smartphones today are prepaid. So probably a third of the customers calling the call center are already on a prepaid phone. The reason they're on a prepaid phone, to answer your second part of your question, is they want to budget. My 68-year-old aunt has a smartphone. She pays $30 a month. It's a prepaid phone, but when she gets notified when she's down to $20 or $25 or $30, and if she wants to add more, she can, but it's a budgetary tool for her. The other thing we see, and which is really remarkable to me, is how so many utilities charge deposits for customers that are income challenged. Well, let's say credit challenged. Okay, it could be a $300 or $400 deposit. With prepaid, they don't charge that. Okay, and then the point you made earlier too was about the surprise bill. Okay, I can tell you, you guys were joking about it being 75 in Austin today, but in August we'll get bills. We'll get very large bills, and we see customer testimonials that say, "I'm afraid to open my power bill," right? Because they have sticker shock. And with prepay, they pay a little bit every day or whenever they want to. They don't get the sticker shock, right? Having two teenage daughters, I'd go around the house coming home when they're from high school, and I would turn up the thermostat in their rooms when I got every day. I got notified every day what I used.
Yeah.
But Dave, we started a discussion at Digital 360 in San Marcos last year about the possibility of inflicting what I call the private airplane model of electricity. Well, I really don't care what it costs. Okay, so I build a neighborhood, and I really don't care what it costs. I expect it to be on all the time. I'm not interested in really in the universal model of pricing. I'm interested in the model of the airline industry. I mean, there are lots of people that they're paid $260,000 a year just to have something NetJet so they can go. And we started the conversation about, there is a market for that. Why isn't it done? So there's nothing wrong with creating a product of electricity for the class of people who don't think that paying anything is
and there is one. We have one. We have, Georgia Power has one. It's called Pay by Day, and you pay $10 a day. You can use all the power you want.
Okay.
For a whole year, every day. It's $10 a day or whatever you want to pay. Pay as much, you can use as much power as you want, and then the year later they'll just. I was on the program for a year, And then a year later, I got a message that said, hey, do you want to continue? Your new price is going to be X, and X is probably higher than it was, but use as much as you want.
That's the country club. Will that
It's like the
spread?
country club.
Will that spread?
Sorry?
Will that spread across America?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think we want it to spread, do we? I mean, well, I will say this. Is that there are some utilities that are generation rich. Okay. Honestly, guys, listen. I'll be honest with you guys. I have had 2 investor-owned utilities who don't like prepay because they don't want to lose the. On average, we're seeing about 8% reduction in electric on an IOU. Okay, it's very consistent. Very consistent. Duke saw it. Georgia Power sees it. We see others, it's SRP, 12%. Okay. We see that there are utilities that don't want prepay because they don't want to lose the revenue.
Okay. I think it's very interesting because I think the utility they haven't created different models for different segments of their.
I like the model that Andres was saying is that, with prepay, maybe you use a lower rate, right? If you're going to prepay, it's kind of like you see in smartphones. Maybe it's cheaper to do prepay because you could, but again, you're advantaging one sector over another, that kind of thing. So,
but let me just remind the generation-rich utilities are remarkably few, given that we have 3,000 utilities, most of which are just distribution companies. Some are generation. Mostly they're just transmission distribution companies, particularly in the co-op world and in the muni world. And some are very large, but they're still only, I think, of Novak outside of Washington. I used to buy my electricity from them when I lived in Virginia. They have no, they have nothing they're selling, so conservation makes sense. I mean, they don't have generation stored up. They don't have a spare kilowatts they want to dispose of at fire sale prices, which is what can be done. So there's not a one size fits all here at all.
That's right.
If you approach it from a utility point of view, there are too many variants. And the generation rich, as you say, will not be in favor. They want to move power. I remember flying around with the chairman of Georgia Power once, and we went in a helicopter and we went over a wood pulping facility, and it smelled bad. And he turned to me and he said, "You think it smells bad, but I can smell the money." He was not interested in reducing the consumption. So it almost comes down to being a matter of policy rather than a matter of commerce, and needs to be implemented probably, I don't know how you guys are doing it, but at least at the State Utility Commission. I mean, I can't imagine that if the State Utility Commission were not in favor, that it would have a very large purchase in the region.
No, I would say this, that Georgia, again, I don't mean to make it light, because Georgia Power is again, they have 85,000 customers on the program. They're fine with the reduction in usage. The customer sat numbers are extraordinarily high. Their debt recovery is extremely high. All 85,000 customers are back to full. They've paid off all their debt since COVID. The call center the call center folks. It's interesting. The morale in the call center has actually gone up because they've given them another tool to help customers. You guys got to realize that when the customers call a call center and they can't pay their $350 bill, there's an agent on the other end of that call that has to take that call, and it's not a fun call to take. It'll say, "Hey, I'm going to sell my camper next week, or my four-wheeler. I get paid next week. I'll pay you next week." That's not a fun phone call for a CSR to take when they can say, "Well, listen, you have a $350 bill. How much can you pay?" And the customer says, "Well, I can pay $40. Great. Go down to the Come and Go or the CVS pharmacy, whatever. Pay $40. We'll turn your lights back on for you within seconds, and you're good to go, right? Then you just pay 10, 15, whatever you can pay." Georgia Power is a leader in that, and their commission has been very, very helpful and supportive of the program.
It would seem to me we're looking at two different things here. We're looking at time of day pricing, anywhere in the country, because you always have a considerable build-up of demand in the evening, and you're looking at something quite different, which is regional effects. If you're in a cold part, you pay a lot of money in winter and less in summer, and vice versa. In Texas, as you said, when I lived in Virginia in an old stone house, I mean, a wonderful home, but our bill went from $100 in summer to $700 in winter. And the idea of leveling would be very attractive. And what we're really talking about here is some form of leveling.
Flat bill, or flat, they call it flat bill, I think is what we've seen, flat bill, yeah. Flat bill, a flat bill,
yeah. But what is the service that you sell?
Yeah, so we do too. So the way the prepay system works is it's software that does these bill calculations. So we can do, again, hourly bill calcs or daily bill calculations. And like, again, SRP, I think maybe you've seen that there's an announcement by SRP that we're going to be redoing their program with Landis and Gear. They have 160,000 customers doing hourly bill calculations, which is 1.4 billion bill calculations per year. Okay, and what we do is we do those bill calculations, and when customers hit thresholds, like you have 5 days remaining, 3 days remaining, 1 day remaining, we message the customer on a mobile app, smartphone, web portal, whatever. So that way the customer says, okay, I have $5 left on my account and I have 1 day left. Will it get me in 2 more days? I got to pay another $5. It helps them budget and keep their lights on. So we do the software, we do the communications, and we do all the payment channels. The average customer pays on prepay, they pay 4 times a month. They pay more frequently. So we're trying to give them ubiquitous, very cheap and easy to use payment channels. So those are the 3 things that we do.
So I have a few bunch of questions that I want to get your insights, David, because you've been in the industry for a long time. I'm curious, what are your thoughts? I mean, so if DER happens, if the electric vehicles catch on, if solar panels are everywhere, do you see the time of use concept on a single premise meter generic concept evolving to pricing for the pool pump, pricing for the EV, pricing for the toaster, pricing for the freezer? Do you see that coming? Does that make sense to you?
Again, if you list all of those items that you just mentioned, the consumer of those products is the person who will get online and apply for those rates. I mean, you can get time of use rates in most states right now, right? So with EVs, and so if you're a consumer of high-end, I would still consider, and by the way, I'd still consider most of those high-end products, right? You don't see a lot of low-income people putting solar panels on their homes because most of them are renters. You'd be amazed. You go to these in certain parts of small towns, what percentage of customers are renters, and they're obviously not going to invest in solar panels, and a lot of times the landlords aren't going to invest in solar panels. But again, those who do invest in those, absolutely, I see them doing time of use pricing. I think you guys know as well as I do, there are certain times of year in Chicago where energy goes negative price, right? So they pay people to take it. So yes, Andres, I truly think that it's going to happen, but and we're further there now than we were 10 years ago.
So you guys have been around for 10 years or so, right?
I've been there 10 years. Yeah.
You say that your penetration within say Georgia Power, within a customer, that is the trend of people using the system, is it flat? Is it increasing? Is it trending down? Is it kind of up and down? What does the trend lines look like in terms of the prepay use for budgeting for whatever? Is it more popular or less popular?
No, it's getting absolutely more popular. In fact, I would say it's trending towards smartphones. If you want to go online and look at the trend line for smartphones, you'll see that. Now, the biggest problem we have, again, you guys know this very well, is that utilities are not fast followers generally, and we're still a little behind the curve in terms of a prepay solution, because there are still lots of states which haven't allowed for prepay, right? We're in front of several states now, but the utilities, our customers are trying to get approval for that. But I will see more every year or every quarter, you'll see another state follow. But what we're seeing, which is really interesting, I actually had dinner with a representative from AARP the other day who used to be against it. We used to have consumer advocates who actively campaigned to get this. You laugh. I mean, because you mentioned how old I am.
I believe it.
30 years ago, 30 years ago, I was selling direct read meters to Austin Energy and CPS and all these other investor-owned utilities. Right? We came out with the digital first, smart. Well, not really smart meter. It was just a electromechanical meter, right? And the first digital meter. And we had to get that approved through the commission, okay? Then the next phase actually had the smart meter. We had to get that approved by the commission, right? So every way along the line, we have to get approved by the commission. That being said, the numbers that I'm giving you guys are real numbers that have come out with IOUs that are being presented to their commissions, which is, as you know, is gospel, right, at that point. And the other utilities are seeing and other commissions are seeing that I'm going to repeat this. The customers are using 7 to 8% less energy all consistently. The customer SAT scores are 80%. At BG&E, it was 96%. Okay, 96%. Okay, and then lastly is 80% of the people that come on the program are paying off their debt. How many other programs? And again, I'm preaching a little bit here, but how many other programs do you see where you get the trifecta? It's a win for the customer, without any doubt. It's a win for the utility, without any doubt, right? So you could argue a lot of other technologies deployed, it's kind of been a win-lose or maybe a zero-sum game. But I think we're getting, to answer your question, I think we're getting very positive trends. I mean, at SRP, they have almost 16% of their customer base.
I would have thought by now, and I think the SRP is the U.S. leader on this because they've been doing it for a long time, and they used to tell me back when I was at Austin Energy, I left in 2010, that half of those customers were using it for budgeting purposes, not for because they were deadbeats kind of thing.
For sure.
Yeah, so but I'm curious, out of all the co-ops and the munis, how come not all of them have adopted it?
I would say
what's the pushback from munis and co-ops?
You see a lot of it in the co-op space. I will tell you, you will see in the co-ops. It's hard. There's really not a database in the co-op market like you could go that prints all this out. But I will tell you that a lot more co-ops use it than you think you do. I want to give you one statistic that SRP did. They did a presentation the other day, and there's one very fascinating statistic that they gave to an industry trade group. They said that when people move within the SRP service territory, so they move from one home to another in SRP service territory. Someone said, well, what percentage of those people who have on prepay want to keep prepay in their new premise? And she said 99%. She goes, no, I'm sorry, 99.9% of people who move want to keep prepay, which just tells you how much they like the program. So again, go back to your point though, a lot of co-ops are using it. IOUs, again, is we've been fighting for, I've been with PayGo for 10 years. We've really been working hard on getting commission approval. And like I said, I got at least 3 projects that are really being upheld by commissions that just don't, and let me just be clear, right? The reason they're concerned about it is they think that customers are going to get disconnected more quickly and more frequently.
Sure.
It's interesting, the BG&E study that we just did, we did a pilot up at BG&E in Maryland, is that 68% of the customers that were on the program said that this program either helped them avoid a disconnection or it helped them reduce the duration of the disconnection at being on prepay.
Right. Well, Dave, I'm fascinated by meters that go shopping for you, by smart meters that go shopping for you.
I think it's going to happen, yeah.
And what that would mean then is that the person themselves will become digital and they're not worried about anything. So I wake up and my meter will shop the landscape for the cheapest electricity. Where would the distribution centers be? Does that mean that all of the we need to connect all of the everything together? The grid has got to be connected together. Or does
Good
it mean,
question. Yeah.
how does it shop? For example, if Texas, if you can't go out of Texas, on the other hand, if we're connected to the northern or the southern grid and etc., then it makes it. How do you visualize that technology, and what's the switching costs, and what does it look like from a technological point of view? Maybe Andre can answer that from a technological.
I'll take a stab, and I'll let him take a stab at it. So let me just, so one thing is, first of all, if you're in a regulated environment like I am, I live in Atlanta, okay? And Georgia Power is and I can't switch Georgia Power, okay? Nor do I want to switch, right? But if you go on Georgia Power's website, I think they have 7 or 8 different rates you can apply for, okay? So what, again, and this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but in theory, what the system could do, if I set up my thermostat such a way, if I went and bought an EV tomorrow, I do believe, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that Georgia Power has a rate structure that's advantageous to EVs, okay? And so I could either sign myself up for that, which I probably would, or I think the system would be smart enough to see that I'm pulling down a huge load about midnight every day or at 7 o'clock at night, and it's going to say, hey, Dave, did you just buy an EV? Yes, and then it goes and looks for an EV rate, something like that. Or it could be the point you made earlier is, guy, Dave, you're sure using a lot of power every day. There's this flat bill rate that's, you could use that, or potentially. So again, I think from a regulated utility, you're going to have to pick from their rates. If you're in Texas, maybe you could go and look at other types of rates, and that might be a really good opportunity for another investment for another startup company, Andres. Maybe as you can find that company, that go-between that can go and find you the rates and parse them off and make it really easy for you to do. So that may be my answer to that question.
Yeah, there's actually services in Texas that do that in the competitive region. So John, the answer is that there are 8 trading regions: Cal ISO, ERCOT, MISO, PJM, New England ISO, New York ISO, so on and so on, where this sort of regional reality exists. So only 8 trading. There's no nationwide trading aspect of that. And some of those trading regions are multi-state, outside of Cal ISO, New York ISO, in ERCOT. All the others are multi-state. And then you got, monopolies within those regions that are munis and co-ops, or monopolies. And then in the non-trading areas, you got Southern Company. They're monopolies in all the states that they work, like I think it's 4 or 5 of them. And then you got Florida, which is a monopoly, Florida Power and Light. And then on the West Coast, you got a bunch of monopolies, right? So it already happens in Texas, where you can go. I think it's called electricityshop.com, or there are a couple of services that you can buy, and you can see, where's the cheapest rate, and you can switch back and forth and all that.
Yeah.
But
But
I think that
it doesn't do it automatically.
What I'm envisioning is a platform like Dave's platform that already does all this could go beyond what it's doing in terms of helping the utility solve problems that have to do with managing real power versus reactive power. For example, every time there's a pool pump doing a work in the house, that is creating bars and reactive power into the transformer, and is bad for the grid. And so when the pool pump runs, the power should be very expensive, versus when, if I'm using my solar panel, then that should be favoring to the utility. So it's interesting that, I think that, when I think about PayGo and prepay, and I see that as books on Amazon 20 years ago, and eventually maybe these platforms are the ones that are going to enable the virtual power plan and the transactive and the managing of all this stuff, because the utilities are not going to do it. The utilities are going to have to partner with somebody.
Yeah, I would say this too, that we're actively, I don't know if you saw, we're partnering with Itron as well. And Itron is looking at putting distributed intelligence in the meter, and we're looking at putting our functionality at the endpoint in the meter. And so the customers will get a real-time, ping when they hit a threshold, or even put rates in the meter where you could do maybe some real-time pricing, or more real-time time of use. One thing I want to say too is, there are other examples of this this real-time information helping you decision making, and we used to call it the Prius effect, right? I mean, if you've ever driven a Prius, it's always fun to to max out at 99 miles per gallon as you're coasting, right? And I think, again, you're just giving customers that information for them to make better decisions.
Right, right.
Well, this is fascinating stuff. I think the business model in the future will be very interesting as the electric industry, grid industry catches up with the automated industry, as things become automated, and then you can do lots of other.
I could tell you we've come an awful long way. I think. I mean, but again, we still there's a lot of pressure on our space because of where customers interact with their banks and financial institutions and their healthcare providers and their smartphone providers. I mean, we've got a ways to go, but it's nice. But we've had some others kind of help create the roadmap for us to follow. But again, as I said, we have some more challenges, right? I mean, certainly, the whole reliability thing is huge, right? I mean, we and utilities are big managers of assets, and so I mean, we have to do a little bit of a changing, not just of our business model, but I think you're going to need to see a little bit of a change in the IOU business model too, where they're incentivized in growing their asset base, specifically and revenues, where maybe we can change it. And I know there's a lot of there are models out there that are trying to change that business model for big utilities.
Right.
One other thing I wanted to, just one last thing because I just find this a fascinating subject when it comes to demand response. Because I know, Anders, you mentioned demand response and where has it gone?
Mm-hmm.
I have always said that I don't understand, first of all, why we should really start educating customers, because we've all heard the numbers that there are 600 power plants in this country that only function 10 days a year as peaking plants, and it's how efficient is that, right? So I don't know how many of you have done what I've done, is you go to a cocktail party and say, they go, hey Dave, what do you do, right? And you end up drawing a demand curve, right? Because you say, well, energy, what about energy? What's interesting about energy? Well, you do a demand curve and you say, well, if you saved 10% at peak 10 days a year, we would have to build another power plant in this country probably for 10 years or whatever. And they find that fascinating. But I don't think we do a good enough job of educating the consumer that maybe even during the day, if they're at home from 2 to 5 or 3 to 6 or whatever their peak is for them to automatically go around and turn stuff off, because they just know better. And part of that is educating customers as they're middle school, high school, college. We could do media ads and say, hey, tomorrow's a peak time day at Georgia Power. Help us out by turning these devices off from this time of day. I think people would do it just because people were greener than they used to be. They're more engaged, I think, than they used to be. And maybe with the smart meters, you can actually get 15-minute interval data. You could actually see if someone is participating in a plan, they could opt in. You could actually give them a peak time rebate and give them a $5 credit on their bill if they choose to participate. And you might be able to see that in a 15-minute interval data in your MDM. Yeah,
I just posted. I found that there are different ones. I found choosetexaspower.org. You type the zip code that you live in Texas, and it tells you what are the prices, and if you want us to change, they'll connect you to the right person. Let me blow your bubble on what you just said, Dave.
Okay.
So we are doing electrification of transportation. Would you agree?
Yes.
And as I recall, the Biden administration wants to install 500,000 EV chargers. They put aside $7.5 billion in the infrastructure bill for that. And they are telling everybody that they need to be carbon neutral in transportation. And the Biden administration has said that when they switch for the 600,000 fleet of vehicles in the federal government, that they're going to go electric, and on and on and on. And we see all the companies emulating Tesla, and Tesla, has won the day in the notion that EVs are here to rule and everybody will go electric. So So if we all agree with that, and that's a fact, and it's going to happen, the question is when. Let me give you a little data point.
Okay.
So let's assume for a moment, fantasize Texas, 22 million registered vehicles. Let's assume that all the vehicles go electric. And let's assume for a moment that they have great capacity. They are the equivalent of a Model S PD 100. They have a 100 kilowatt hour battery, just to make the math simple. So you multiply 22 million vehicles times 100 kilowatts, that gives you 2,200, that is 2,200 gigawatts of energy needed by those vehicles if they were to charge at the same time. Clearly, we're not going to let that happen, and so on and so on. But ERCOT only produces 80 gigawatts today at peak capacity. So if all the vehicles in Texas go electric, we will need to go beyond the 80 gigawatts.
So how do you do that?
We will have to build more power plants to electrify the entire sector,
No,
right?
So
the notion of mothballing anything that is running today is a dumb idea.
No, I don't disagree with you. I really do. In fact, I'm actually, my dad was taught physics at a community college for years, and he was a huge nuclear fan. So we can have another discussion about nuclear power, but I don't know that we can have a fully renewable fleet without nuclear power, but that's probably a subject for another day. But
I totally agree with you, Dave. Without nuclear power, you won't get that. I also agree with the huge surge that I think is coming in electricity demand through the electrification of transportation. But one impediment may be what's happening in the world today. It's not just energy that the world is suddenly short of because of the war in Ukraine. It's also a whole slew of vital metals and materials used in the electrification of the system. They include nickel, cobalt, lithium, and it is unclear whether we can head into the electric future nearly as fast as we thought we could if we can't make the batteries.
And what are we doing with the batteries, Llewelyn, when we're done with them?
This is a very interesting idea. Somebody's got to have some way of recirculating them, taking the valuable materials out. We're suddenly facing a uranium shortage. That's insane. We're throwing away most of the uranium we use or don't use in cores because we won't reprocess them. Everything is going to have to be reprocessed, from nuclear cores to lithium batteries, until there is some different evolution. And we're going to need more batteries. We are going to have vertical takeoffs, Johnny. Indeed, some days I look at you and I think you're going to ascend through the roof right there in front of me.
I might do that. But that's a great point about the relationship between all the materials that we will use. But remember, when we switched from horse and buggies right to the combustion engine.
I'm not that old, but I take your word for it.
And we switched from typewriters to computers. And to make this switch, as you know better than me, Llewelyn, there'll be entrepreneurs who will come in to fill the gap. John Goodenough won the Nobel Prize here with his battery research here at the University of Texas. And I think that as we move forward, entrepreneurs will come in and fill the gap anywhere, everything from new power stations to how we power electric vehicles. And it's going to be
how about hydrogen? Hydrogen seems to have some.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Well, the hydrogen, Llewelyn tells me, is unstable. It's kind of like a lot of.
I'm not saying it's unstable. I say it requires a different regime to handle it. It has low BTU, it has high flame rate, and a very small molecule. All of those things simply suggest that you need a different regime, and that it's not a one-for-one replacement of natural gas with hydrogen, which is what people tend to think it is. And we used basically hydrogen in the days of town gas, which was made from coal, but was largely hydrogen. And I lived in England at the time when we still used town gas. And the low BTU thing was a big factor in trying to cook, trying to get enough hot water out of a flash heater. You couldn't. I mean, tepid showers were the order of the day. So just don't think that you're going to replace natural gas with hydrogen. And the unknown, I mean, the part of this thing that is yet unknown is how successful we will be at capturing carbon, and how much carbon we can capture without too large an energy penalty. I'm of the belief that the next great breakthrough is going to be not in a non-carbon generating source, but in a carbon capture from established generating fuels, like particularly natural gas, which at the moment is anybody who tries to close down any natural gas facility today is an idiot. You've got Europe suffering terribly. They have just enough gas to get through, as I said earlier, to get through the summer, through this winter, the tail end of winter, but they don't have enough for next winter. And the incredible folly, I mean, the folly is unbelievable, that Germany closed down 6 beautiful nuclear power plants.
Yeah. Who's going to talk to the Chinese, by the way, who just bought 100 million tons of coal from Russia as part of this? That was a, that came out right before the 100 million tons of coal.
Do the math. Look. The United States entire production capacity as a country, it's 1,100 gigawatts. China's entire production capacity is 1,500 gigawatts.
Wow.
If the United States goes electric on vehicles, that's 280 million vehicles times 100 kilowatts. That's 28,000 gigawatts. 28,000 gigawatts. Yeah. That is 28 times our current production capacity in the United States. What do you think is happening in China? They're leading in the EV revolution. They need to build power plants at a pace that they have never seen before.
Yeah.
And right behind them is India. India is struggling mightily to get up to some sort of decent level in production. They're building nuclear as fast as they can, and of course they're inhibited, as we are, by their internal politics. India is coming out and has 1.4 billion people. It's about equal paying with China in numbers of people needing heat and cooling, etc., and transportation. That we used to, back in the energy crisis, when we talked about the shortage of oil, we'd say, oh my goodness, what happens when every Chinese gets a Volkswagen? Well, that's happened.
That's right.
And when they get a Tesla or equivalent.
Yeah, really.
Well, remember, they don't have to go through the politics that we have to go through. They have.
Don't believe that. There is always politics. It may not be our open democratic politics.
There's bureaucracy. There's bureaucracy for sure, right?
Yeah. Bureaucracy. China is establishing a huge unexamined bureaucracy which will do terrible things that will slow it down. This idea that autocracies axiomatically do things better than democracies is nonsense. They fall victim to their own fundamental inefficiency, John.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
An autocracy is inefficient by its very nature. When power is disseminated from the top to the bottom, there's lots of room for corruption and fooling around along the way down. And if you don't have a free and open press, sometimes shining the bright light of fact, you've got a problem. And they've got a problem. They've got a huge problem. They are establishing the largest industrial autocracy the world has ever seen. And it's going to be top heavy, and top heavy things have a tendency at some point in time to topple.
It may not be very efficient after all, Llewelyn.
No, it's not very efficient.
But effective. It's effective.
God knows, John knows I love efficiency. I love the efficiency of the inefficient. I love the efficiency of chaos, the efficiency of it'll be all right on the night.
That's right. That's right. Dave, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Dave.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I apologize for my colleagues.
No, anytime. Let's do it again. So,
thank you for being with us. John, take us away.
Okay, let's do this. Georgia woman, sweet Georgia, the whole day through. Just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my
Nine.
mind.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
All
Bravo,
right.
bravo.
Thanks,
Very
everybody.
interesting day. Very good to be with you. Thank
Good
you.
to be with you all. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your week.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me stop recording.